Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video. Today we are taking a look at yet another one of Jim Sterling's videos because the last one did so well, and I thought I would try my hand at another one of his videos. I was going to do a response to his video on Hogwarts Legacy, and good lord, that game is still living rent-free in Jim's head 2 years after the controversy about it. Anyways, since I didn't know enough about anything in regards to that game or J.K. Rowling, I thought I would go ahead and do the next best thing, something that I am truly knowledgeable on, and that is Jim Sterling's Elden Ring video. Something that's very common every time FromSoftware releases a new video game is people demanding that FromSoft games have an easy mode, to which I say they do. However, we'll get into that later on in the video. Before we begin this video, however, I just want to say that you guys knocked it out of the park with the last video. I jumped up by well over 200 subscribers, and while to a lot of people that will be baby numbers, considering that the previous video was my best performing one ever since I've had a YouTube channel, then that's really saying something. Anyways, so Elden Ring came out 2 years ago, and Jim made a video demeaning people for saying that these games don't need an easy mode, right? Well, we're going to be looking at that video today. Take it away, Jim from 2 years ago!
Elden Ring has been released, and with it has come a flurry of discourse. But the only real point in this discussion to be acknowledged is that I'm a better Elden Ring player than you. And I'm going to stake my entire identity on that. I might not be better at playing the game, but I'm better at enjoying the game than you, than all of you.
I don't know about anyone else, but I personally find that claiming that you're better at enjoying a game than other people is very cringy, my guy. But you say that you're not better at playing Elden Ring than other people, but you are instead better at enjoying it, which means you're better at Elden Ring? Huh? I'm sorry, could you elaborate, man? Because I am so confused right now, dude.
Really? 1v1 me as we discuss the themes, bruh. I think that's all that really needs to be acknowledged, but I get paid to make videos, so I can't just go, so I suppose we better talk about video games instead of playing them.
And before we go too much further into the video, Jim, I would just like to say that if you would just talk about video games and leave the politics and the lectures on gamers sucking and reasons as to why you hate gamers, then maybe, just maybe, that mass exodus of subscribers from your YouTube channel would not have happened. But eventually, as the years slowly slipped by, you became more and more of the thing you hated, and now, in the year of our Lord, 2024 AD, your YouTube channel is but a hollow husk of what it used to be. As I said in the last video, Jim, you're no longer the voice of reason in the gaming industry that you used to be. Not only are you no longer needed here, you are no longer wanted either. To make a long story short, if you had been talking about video games and only about video games since, when was it? When the SJW stuff started to really blow up? 2016, I think it was? Anyways, around about there, you started drifting more and more into politics, and then 2020 is when you really came full circle and became everything you used to hate. You had one job, Jim, and you blew it.
You know, I'm not one for the just shut up and play fucking video games rhetoric. I do, in fact, find it quite tasteless and borderline offensive at times. I'm often told to just shut up and play video games when I dare to talk about industry abuse, or examine game industry trends through a mildly political lens, or when I talk about social issues on my social media.
And that's why your channel is failing, Jim. I'm quite sure no one has a problem with you bringing up social issues on social media or whatever, but your YouTube channel is, or was at least, based around reviewing video games, not raising awareness about social issues, as far as I can recall. And like I said earlier, when you inject politics into things like video game review videos, you know, things that politics should not be in at all, as you're going to be alienating at least half of your audience. and that's one of the reasons why your channel had a mass exodus of subscribers. I know I said that in the last bit, but it still bears repeating to these SJW nutjobs who insert politics into everything.
The just play games attitude prevalent in the online gaming community is intellectually lazy, philosophically cowardly, and typifies aggressively apathetic centrism that one finds embodied by the privileged entitlement of a class of nerds that has never had to think about a real problem in their lifetime.
Ah, yes, a privileged class of nerds who have never had to think about a real problem in their lifetimes. Talk about irony. Jim, in the last video I did on you, you were whining about being called slurs despite the fact that you didn't provide any evidence to back them up, so I'm dismissing that claim. And you were also whining about being called a man in your video comment sections, and people misgendering, air quotes, you. And let's not forget that you get to sit on your lazy duff all the livelong day, making YouTube videos where you spew verbal diarrhea all over the place, and then you get paid money for it, which, as I saw earlier on your Patreon account, your income is going down. It's down by about $4,000 since the last time I checked. Before I checked earlier today, it was like 10 grand to 12. Now it's down to about 8,933. It's good to know that people are finally waking up to Jim Sterling's nonsense. Let's hope we can get it all the way down to zero so that we can get Jim back out into the real world so he can see how easy he really had it. To be honest, I'm genuinely surprised that Jim has any subscribers left at all, let alone a fraction of the subscribers that he has that still follow him, to be honest.
All that said, if hardcore From Software fans could just shut the fuck up and play video games, I think I'd enjoy that very, very much. Let me specify that I'm talking about a particular type of supposed, alleged, hardcore From Software fan.
So are these the From Software fans that exist in reality? Or are they the voices that you hear in your head that sometimes manifest as YouTube comments in your comment section that weren't actually typed into your YouTube comment section and you just think that they were typed into your YouTube comment section? Sorry, Jim, I'm having a hard time following the story here.
A new From Software game has been unleashed upon the world, and with it has come the same tiresome, dreary, circular discourse that occurs whenever FromSoft offers up its particular blend of challenge, depth, beautiful bleakness, and obfuscating lore. As per the usual, the endless debate over game difficulty and accessibility has reared its all too familiar head, and while I usually wade into the fray with embattled diligence to argue that easy modes are perfectly acceptable, optional, and not at all problematic in literally any video game, I'm not going to argue anymore, because it's not an argument these days, it's just a performance.
Well, it's about time that you admit to these videos being a performance, Jim. Also, have you not noticed that difficulty in most video games, at least in regards to RPGs, don't do jack doodly squat, except give the enemies you come across higher numbers to deal with, and that's about it? Look at games like Doom. Oh, and before anybody says anything, I know, I'm comparing apples to oranges here, but seriously, answer me. In RPGs like Elden Ring, what would difficulty change exactly? All it'd most likely do is raise or lower the numbers that the enemies have, maybe make them lose some combat moves or gain them depending on the difficulty chosen. In the classic Doom games, difficulty changed how many monsters you faced and even where some ammo or other supplies would be. In RPGs like Elden Ring, all the difficulty options would do is change the enemy's numbers at best. Regardless, difficulty options are not something that Hidetaka Miyazaki wants in his games, and since he's the one who's making the game and not you, that means that Miyazaki has final say on whether difficulty options are in his games or not. But in true Western worlder fashion, you are so entitled to getting what you want that you think you get to tell the Japanese man what he can and can't do with this game. Can't you just respect Miyazaki's vision, Jim? This is what he wants, and he should be given that. But people like Jim say, nope, can't do that, friendo. I'm going to bring this up every single time you release a new Soulsborne game until the day I die.
The community is on autopilot with this endlessly repetitive debate. There's no hope of a resolution. Long ago, this whole discussion became nothing but an exercise in grandstanding. I've pointed out before that for all my show gets accused of repeating points, which it does, yes, actual gamer discourse is itself perpetually recycled garbage. The same tiny handful of debates repeating themselves over and over again. Stupid and insignificant controversies surrounding review scores, whether or not a game is too woke for daring to have women and queers in it.
I can tell you all right now that literally no one except for Harman Smith thinks that a game is too woke for including women and queers in it. Also, since you've been in the endlessly repetitive debate, then why do you keep bringing it up? It's not going to change, Jim. You've been in this game, no pun intended, for the better part of a decade now. Nothing has changed, and you've clearly seen it for yourself, so what's the point in talking about something that you know you're never going to change? Ever. As for your show repeating points, aren't you the one researching all these topics and writing the episodes out and all that stuff, Jim? So isn't it you who is deciding to repeat these points? Honestly don't know, Jim. Although I do seem to recall you saying something similar years ago about your show repeating points. Something in regards to Mario Kart 8, a game where you actually raised points that I agree with still today, but that was cool, Jim Sterling, not SJW Jim Sterling. I wonder how many of you all remember when Jim got attacked by Nintendrones for giving The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild a 7 out of 10. I'm willing to bet actual money that Harman Smith was one of them. And you all know about the homiciding, when Digital Homicide sued Jim for $10 million because he didn't like their game. Oh, those were better days looking back. But as the saying goes, hindsight is always 20/20.
The gatekeeping aversion to accessibility in protest of the mythical casualization of video games, and that's it, isn't it? Craig, are there any more things that the gamers care about? That pretty much is all that the full-time hardcores who've made their entire identity gaming give a shit about, right? I don't know, maybe not. I don't particularly care anymore. Maybe I left a few more regurgitated topics off the list, but it won't have been many. God, just fuck traditional gamer TM discourse. It's just so fucking puerile. And I've been doing this job for over 10 years and nothing's been resolved. Nothing has changed.
I've no doubt that there is a joke in that clip somewhere that I could make, although I do find it funny how Jim thinks that he has so much pull that he could actually change anything other than himself. To quote Mischief Jim, "You are a YouTuber, you are not God. And you would be lying to yourself if you didn't notice that games are becoming more and more casual over the years. There's a reason why so many fans of games like Dark Souls are opposed to having difficulty options in these games, Jim. One of them being exactly how games nowadays are so casualized. For example, it's people like you who demand that Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, and all those similar games to them have easy modes, that we now have games that hold your hand so tightly that they practically spell things out for you. For example, and I've never played an Uncharted game, so please bear with me, but it's these people who demand easy modes in games where, if in Uncharted, we go into a room with a pedestal, Nathan Drake will say, I bet if I push that pedestal into the light beam over there, something will happen. I know that's a pretty poor example, but nowadays in video games, like, they just tell the player straight up instead of just giving hints or letting the player figure it out for themselves. But, and this will be a real sticking point to you, Jim, if you play a Dark Souls game enough, put in enough time, actually practice and do some research, upgrade your gear, level up your character, and how to time dodges, blocks, and attacks properly, then it turns out that From Software's Soulsborne RPGs aren't even that hard. They are, but mere learning curves. I should know because the first time, literally the very first time that I played Dark Souls 1, I was terrible at it. But I did research and I watched other people play the game and I level up like crazy and improve my gear when I play, and guess what? That made the game easier for me. It'll make the game easier for you. From Software almost always gives the player the tools that they need to get past a roadblock or an obstacle or whatever. And it's the player's job to figure out how to make the most of it.
Why did I respond to Jason Schreier's tweet? Why did I do it? Why do I do these things to myself? That's all my replies have been for days. We could have all been just simping over this selfie, but instead everyone's talking about whether you need a notebook for Elden Ring. I shouldn't have done it. I do it to myself.
For those of you who didn't see the tweet that Jim included, it was from Jason Schreier, and he was talking about how if you're going to play Elden Ring, you really should invest in a notebook. And he's right. Dude, Elden Ring's world is massive, and if you're going to be playing it and trying to do all the side quests in the game, then a notebook is essential. You aren't always going to remember what someone in-game said or where they'll be heading off to next, so you write that stuff down. But in true Jim Sterling fashion, instead of showing gratitude and thanking Jason, what does Jim do? He basically says, "Screw you for trying to solve my problem. Jim, I have memory issues and I think I have ADHD as well. So for me, writing stuff like what Elden Ring has down in a notebook, every little thing in Elden Ring, it'll help considerably."
Anyway, Elden Ring. It's a very good game. While we're on the topic, it's quite forgiving by Soulsborne standards, but given the series' penchant for punishing its players' mistakes, that's not saying too much. Regardless, there's been another shitstorm of debate over how accessible it should be, whether easy modes are the devil, and the merits of obtuse, willfully uninformative game design, and just... God, I'm tired of it.
Of course you're tired of it, Jim. You were fighting a losing battle for what, over a decade by that point in time? Regardless, accessibility is not the same thing as difficulty options, or rather, they are impossible to be linked together. Just because a game has difficulty options doesn't mean that it won't be accessible. And while I do agree that Elden Ring needs accessibility options, that means things like a colorblind mode, to give you but one minor example. Seriously, Jim, I have heard that people without fingers have beaten Elden Ring, and if someone who has no fingers can do it, anyone can. You also, oddly enough, don't hear those people without fingers whining about Elden Ring not having difficulty options, do you? You also admitted that of all the Soulsborne games out there, Elden Ring is the one that needs difficulty options the least, because it's so forgiving compared to the earlier Dark Souls trilogy. I'll tell you that much.
That's what I thought as my Twitter replies were inundated. I actually don't want to hear it anymore. The fan base is indeed fucking exhausting. The get good attitude that has festered among hardcore Souls fans for years is truly contemptuous at this stage. Get good once started as a joke, but has since been taken far too seriously by people who stake far too much of their self-esteem on whether or not they can fight a pretend dragon without any friends. It's worth noting that nobody's actually impressed if you're brilliant at video games. None of us actually care. In fact, the more you brag about it as if it's worth a damn, the more we think you're fucking pathetic.
Jim, the only one that I see who is indeed flipping exhausting would be you these days. If you honestly think getting through the entirety of, say, Elden Ring or Dark Souls 1 without taking a single point of damage, or rather, without getting hit by an enemy once throughout an entire playthrough isn't good, then you are delusional. There's no other way of saying it. You're lying to yourself if you didn't think it was impressive if someone beat Elden Ring or Dark Souls 1 without taking damage once. Besides for which, reasons like that are why we have esports, and if nobody cared, then those people wouldn't be making more money than either of us will ever earn in our entire lifetimes. In addition to that, I have never heard anyone bragging about being good at Soulsborne Games. I like to think that I'm great at Dark Souls 1, but I have never once run around and bragged about it. And again, I don't know of anyone who's good at them doing that. Seriously, to those of you who watched this video this far, please comment below and tell me of anyone you've seen bragging about being good at Soulsborne Games. Hey, sorry, this is future Jestan here, but remember, Jim Sterling was bragging earlier in the video about being better at Elden Ring because he's better at it enjoying it. Anyone else remember that?
Okay, that's harsh. It's okay to feel accomplished at making your way through a particularly challenging video game, but once you start talking about it as if it makes you better than other people, if you start sneering at those who needed help, and bemoaning video games being made more welcoming to newcomers or those with disabilities, you can just go ahead and fuck yourself. Literally, fuck yourself, because Lord knows I don't think you should inflict your pointless little genitals on anybody else. There's no debate to be had here. No argument. I could actually provide a litany of reasons why accessibility in a video game is good.
And again, I don't disagree, but you cannot link difficulty options with accessibility options. Again, Jim, you yourself said that it's okay to make your way through a particularly challenging dungeon or whatever in a video game and feel satisfied about it. I agree. But who exactly is acting like it makes them better than others? Dude, I didn't even experience that back when I was in school.
I could point you to Laura Kate Dale's Accessibility series. In fact, actually go look at that series, it's very good.
Don't watch Laura Kate Dale's video on why games like Dark Souls and Elden Ring need difficulty options. Watch Mischief's response video to the one that Jim points you to instead. Speaking of Mischief, whatever happened to him? It's like he's been erased from existence. I haven't heard from him in over a year now. It's kinda worrying, to be honest.
But to make the arguments here on this show, I feel like I'd be wasting my goddamn time, because they just need to be said again the next time a hard game is released and gamers TM glom onto it to swing their dicks around. Let me just say this. Plain as day. The more accessibility options a video game has, the better. And that's just that. That's just the way it is. This isn't a subjective opinion. There is no debate here. It's a stone cold, goddamn fucking fact. Literally every game is better when it has more accessibility options, and the more accessibility options literally every game has, the better.
And once more with feeling, Jim, I don't disagree with you here, but did you notice something in those screenshots that you included in this video, Jim? The thing is, neither of them had difficulty options in the accessibility options, because accessibility options doesn't equate to difficulty options. Accessibility means things like a colorblind mode. It means things like that to make it easier for disabled players to play the game the same way a non-disabled person does. There is a fine line between, hey, can you put in accessibility options like a colorblind mode so that I can play the game the same way as a non-colorblind person would? And, hey, can you put in an easy mode because I suck at the game and just don't want to get better at it?
Like, it's never made sense to me that anybody would have a problem with more people enjoying a good game. First of all, more people having a nice time is never bad. Why would you not want other people to have a nice time unless you're a misanthropic shitfucker? Second of all, if you love these games as much as you claim, surely you want more people to enjoy it. The more successful the game is, the more it reaches people, the more money it'll make, the more content will be made available, the more game you will have to enjoy. Plus, the more successful a game is, the more people that it reaches, the happier the developers will be. And do they not deserve to be happy after making you happy? The only people who would, in fact, have a problem with that are pricks. Gatekeeping, elitist, sad little pricks.
I promise you, Jim, as a longtime Soulsborne fan, none of us have a problem with more people playing Soulsborne games. You are correct in that if more people are enjoying the game, then all that other bullplop you talked about would be true, but who exactly is it that's getting gatekept? is the people who demand that an easy mode be available in these games because, again, they just don't want to get good at playing the game. You want to be included with the people that are playing these games, that's fine, but don't demand them have an easy mode. There are countless games out there now that have easy modes in them, and most of these games are so easy and hold your hand so tightly that they don't make you try and figure stuff out on your own. For example, I like getting achievements in games, and I've got about 10 or so platinum achievements on Steam under my belt. And I did it so I could scratch something off of my bucket list. Getting some of those achievements is actually pretty hard, but for other games like The Last of Us 2, I think it was, getting the platinum for that game is mind-numbingly easy from what I've heard. But for some games, it's actually pretty hard. Like, you have to beat the game on the hardest difficulty, or in Vaporum's case, there's one achievement where you have to beat the game, I think, in under a certain amount of time, and you can't take more than a grand total of 5,000 points worth of damage. It's actually really flippin' hard. But that's one of the reasons why so many people are against Soulsborne Games having easy modes. They're one of the few game series out there now that give us a challenge when other games won't. But do you want to hear something truly sad? When you play one Soulsborne game long enough, the way I have done with Dark Souls 1, then eventually the game loses the claim that it's hard. But that's because I poured so much time and effort and energy into Dark Souls 1. Besides for which, even if you aren't good at games like Dark Souls, then all the Soulsborne games really are learning curves. I promise you, Soulsborne games, while challenging at first, require you to learn them and their systems before you can truly make progress with them. That's all.
And this is why I decided to make no substantive arguments in favour of accessibility today, because the people who need to hear it explicitly don't want to. They don't care. They're selfish.
No, Jim, you didn't make any good arguments on Soulsborne games needing an easy mode, because there are none, and besides for which, Hidetaka Miyazaki has made it pretty clear that he doesn't want easy modes in his games. If ever there is an easy mode in a Soulsborne game, then it'll be because that is what Miyazaki wants. It's his vision, not yours, not anybody else's. If you don't like what's in the vision of Hidetaka Miyazaki's games, then leave and go play something else.
They only view these games through the single lens of how they want to play it, how they engage with the medium, and what they believe is the one true way to experience video games. Anything that dares to challenge or confront that is met with hostility. Because on the whole, a lot of these people only know or care about video games. They don't have other interests.
Nice to know that Jim's psychic powers are so tremendous and his crystal ball is so amazing that he seems to know everything about Soulsborne fans, even though he's literally never met a one of them, I'm sure. So him acting like he knows all of these people from Adam and Eve is just hilarious to me. Also, Jim, you sound like you're projecting to me. Then again, that's par for the course with people like Jim. They are all vampires because they have no self-reflection, you see?
If there's one thing Gamergate taught us, with all its gatekeeping, elitism and hatred of minorities, it's that people with no form of enrichment outside of video games can be right dickheads. Those who have pinned their entire sense of self on a single geeky medium naturally don't want a diverse range of people to get into video games, because then it will reflect how much of an individual they aren't.
And stuff like that remind me why Jim continues to bleed subscribers by the thousands each week, or he used to, at least. He's injecting what we would eventually come to know as DEI into a video about Soulsborne games needing an easy mode. Then he goes on to play the diversity card, not realizing that the gaming industry is incredibly diverse. Jim, not only have I heard stories about people without fingers beating the game, and I think colorblind people have beaten the game, or people with ADHD and memory issues beating the game, but I've seen women play Elden Ring and love it. I have seen black people, play Elden Ring and love it, and countless other minorities playing Soulsborne games and loving them, and certainly being better at the games than I will ever hope to be. And yet you're sitting here, whining about how games don't have diversity? Jim, you need to get help. Seriously, you need a therapist. Go see one, because your ideology has taken over your entire identity. Also, didn't Gamergate happen in, like, 2014? Are you still hung up on that, Jim? You really shouldn't let a grudge rule your life, Jim. Do as they say on Twitter, and go outside and touch some grass. It'll do you a world of good, I promise you.
When loving video games became mainstream, a lot of people who love only video games didn't feel special anymore.
It's not that gamers didn't feel special anymore, it's that certain games no longer feel special because the exact same people who were telling us, you know, video games suck and you shouldn't be playing them, go outside, do work, get a job and all the rest, are now the same people saying, where the womans at? Where the minorities at? Where all the needless horse poo that shouldn't be in the game, as this takes place in the year of 1500 BC at? That's what we dislike, Jim. Literally no one except for Harman Smith has a problem with women or queers or people of color being in the game at all. What we have a problem with is when politics and lectures and all the imagery is put into the game when it has literally no reason to be in the game at all. Anyone else ever notice that you never see the people Jim are whining about demanding that their groups have their imagery put into the game? Their beliefs, their movements, any of that stuff? And look, I'm not trying to offend minorities, women, queers, any of them, but please keep movement-based stuff out of video games, out of all entertainment, really. Having women, queers, people of color in the games, I can 100% respect that, and I do in fact welcome it, 100%. But when you start adding things like pride flags or whatever, that's when people start to have a problem with it. Not the people that the movement speaks on behalf of, but rather that the movement is invading entertainment.
So to the supposed From Software fans, the really hardcore ones who get way too invested in this shit, please stop. You'll be on the point crossed by the Undertale fan community at this point, which I say, as a huge Undertale fan, your endlessly antagonistic and frankly miserable attitudes whenever a new game comes out just puts people the fuck off. Which I guess is indeed what you want. You clearly want to limit the number of people who can enjoy these games, but speaking as someone who really enjoys From Software's output, it's just fucking draining at this point.
Jim, for the last time, the only people who are getting gatekept from Soulsborne games are the people who refuse to adapt to what the game wants. And again, Jim, it sounds like you're projecting. The only one that I see with an antagonistic attitude towards anyone is you, big guy. You're the one who is, at this moment, antagonizing the Soulsborne fan base. Either play the game and get good at it, or play something else. We all sucked at Soulsborne games when they first came out, but those of us who managed to stick with it eventually managed to play the game at least somewhat well because we put time into it and learned what the game wanted. Why can't these people like you, demanding an easy mode, do the same?
And you know, for all of your self-aggrandizing, for all of your representing yourself as a true Soulsborne fan, you're not actually representative of the proper Soulsborne fan base.
And what, pray tell, makes you think you are, Jim? No one is looking to Jim Sterling to talk about Soulsborne games, at least not anymore. You cashed that card in ages ago when you stopped talking about video games and more about politics and lectures. That's why most Western entertainment is dying, because people like you just can't help yourselves from injecting politics and lectures, and why the people who consume the type of entertainment are just purest evil scum of the earth, yet you still can't be bothered to figure out why you bleed subscribers on a weekly basis by the thousands. Or used to, at least.
You may visibly represent it through the sheer volume of your caterwauling, but you're not representative of what the series is designed for, who the series is designed for.
And yet again, I'm forced to ask, what makes you think you are, Jim?
Because for as much as it challenges and punishes a player, it's a series of jolly cooperation, of experiencing hardship together, and despite the ability to invade the worlds and ruin the lives of other players, in the face of its overwhelming challenge, the Soulsborne series is ultimately about not being a fucking dick to other people.
You just said that the Soulsborne games are about experiencing hardship together, of which I do fully agree with you on, but do you not realize that if you add in an easy mode to Elden Ring or any other From Software game, that you are taking away experiencing hardship together? We all start on the same level, and some of us know that if we want to move beyond that starting level, then we have to improve not just our character, their level, and their equipment, but our gameplay style as well. If you want to experience hardships, then play the game the way it was designed and build a character around it, not the way that you want it to be played, if that makes any sense.
Let me explain that point. Many years ago, when Demon's Souls was released, I made this argument that it is one of the best multiplayer experiences, and I wasn't actually talking about any of the cooperative or invasive elements of the game. I was actually talking about the little phantoms you see of other players existing in the world in the same areas as you. If you are unfamiliar, Elden Ring does this as well. You see very temporary glimmers of other players in the same area as you, performing actions in real time. Just the character models rolling, fighting, exploring, whatever. And I absolutely loved that as a concept, because to me, it sent the message that even if you're on your own, you and a whole bunch of other players are suffering together. And that to me was a very crucial point of that experience. You might be facing all of these hardships, you might be facing them on your own, but so is everybody else. Shared suffering, it's better than suffering on your own. I certainly know that when I'm going through a rough, traumatic, upsetting time, I find myself wishing everybody else was. So yeah, that's what the Soulsborne series has always meant to me. Shared suffering, shared pain. And I think a lot of the people who truly love that series sort of embrace. We see this in the messages that are left on the floor for other players, warning them of impending doom. We see this with the amount of players that actually post up for cooperative play, which is one of my favourite things to do. I'm very much a dedicated Sunbro. I'm all about the co-op. And that's what I mean when I say that I'm better at video games than you, than all of you. I am just the best one because I understand video games and you don't. Prick. Thank God for me.
Hello. See, Jim, you do truly understand what the Soulsborne games are about. You know about the shared suffering, and the multiplayer is there to help you out should you need it. However, by adding in easy modes, you are taking that away because then literally no one is playing the same game anymore. But it would seem that you do understand that when we all play Elden Ring together, or any Soulsborne game together, we can help and harm each other. But anyways, that's the end of Jim's video, thank God, because that was one of the most painful 13 minutes and 40 seconds of video that I have ever had to sit through in my life. Please, if you've made it this far, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. Normally I don't do that, but for this video I'm making an exception. But anyways, we're done now. But before we go, I just want to say that if you struggle with any Soulsborne games, or at least Dark Souls 1, and you need help, then please don't hesitate to contact me. I will gladly try to help you in whatever way I can, whether that be through helping you get past a boss or just giving you some tips on a boss. I'm here to help. And with that, we are truly done with Jim's god-awful video, so I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye for now.